Hello everyone, this is Cam from Entertainment, and today I got a new entertainment talk video for you. Today I'll be talking about the initial differences between the Last of Us video game from 2013 and the TV show adaptation from HBO, which has 5 episodes so far. This goes without saying, but this video will be filled with major spoilers regarding both the video game from 2013 as well as the first few episodes of the TV show adaptation of The Last of Us. So watch at your own risk. You have been warned. So far, The Last of Us TV show has given us plenty of tragedy, action, drama, and suspense. The showrunners and writers have stayed quite faithful to the 2013 video game, while also doing something different and changing things up here and there, which I appreciate as well. So far, I have found the show to be extremely entertaining, and I thought it'd be fun to do a little video just discussing the initial differences between the video game and the TV show. Also throughout this video, I'll talk about some of the big similarities and aspects that have stayed faithful to the original game in the TV show. Anyway, I'm going to talk about all this and more in just a bit. So one of the biggest initial differences you'll notice between the TV show and the video game is that in the video game, the beginning was set at 2013, making the 20-year time jump take us to 2033. But in the show, however, the opening takes place in 2003, with the time jump taking us to 2023. Now, this was mainly done because the showrunner felt like it felt more realistic to not jump so far in the future, even though, it's like a pandemic apocalypse kind of thing, and obviously not much would change in that time. I do think it made sense why they decided to have it start in 2003 instead, and then the time jump takes us into 2023, kind of being our present day. In a totally different universe, obviously. Now, let's continue talking about the first episode and the big differences there. The opening scene is an addition that wasn't present in the game. It explains the fungal pandemic dating all the way back to the 1960s, as discussed on a talk show of some sort. This addition also goes with the daytime scenes that were added simply for background information. In the game, the world is discussed more through a newspaper that you pick up early on, warning of spikes of hospitals as well as contaminated crops. Along with this idea, you initially play as Sarah in the opening and connect with her in the game, so the show kind of needed a way for us to connect with her. The 20-year time jump after the opening events are a bit different, as in the game, we open with Joel, who wakes up as Tess enters his apartment. In the show, however, there's a scene that follows a child that enters the quarantine zone. Also in the game, Joel and Tess do not do jobs for Fedra as they do in the show. Instead, they solely get ration cards through smuggling. One gameplay aspect that is completely missing in the show is the respirators, as often in the game as early as the very beginning, you would need to wear them since the infection can be transmitted through the air. The characters in the show, however, never wear these. Ellie's introduction is quite different too. In the game, the first encounter with her is when she tries to stab Tess and Joel while already having a close relationship with Marlene and not being shackled up. In the show, she is shackled up and angry when we first see her, and Marlene is actually the one to untie her when they first meet. Joel, Tess, and Ellie travel through the Bostonian Museum in both the game and the show, where they come across the clickers for the first time. The main change in episode 2's version of this scene is that Ellie gets bitten while being attacked. This only serves to further demonstrate her immunity to cordyceps infection throughout the episode. Also in episode 2, while Joel, Tess, and Ellie navigated Boston's streets, we learned more about how the sickness spreads in this iteration of The Last of Us. In the show, cordyceps spreads through tendrils as opposed to airborne spores, which is how it was done in the game. And as a result, the afflicted are even more interconnected, which is kind of an interesting way to approach the concept. Just like the game, Tess ends up dying, which is one of the biggest gut punches of episode 2, except the way she died was approached quite differently. After escaping Fedra in the game, Joel and Ellie make their way to Bill's town, as Joel has a survivalist friend there that can help them acquire a car. In the show, however, the idea to find Bill comes from Tess instead. In the game, Joel and Ellie come across Bill, which they then return to his home, where they find that Frank has killed himself, and even left a nasty note saying that Frank hated Bill's guts, which is just really depressing. Eventually, Joel and Ellie leave, leaving Bill to mourn Frank's passing by himself, and he's still alive. This show changes things up quite a bit in episode 3, but honestly, I'd say it's for the best. Here, the backstory shows that Bill is a survivalist in the beginning who takes Frank in and they become a couple. Eventually, they meet Joel and Tess. Frank later admits that he has a fatal illness and will soon pass away. After Frank decides to kill himself, Bill decides to accompany him since he doesn't want to be alone, and the two men pass away together, which is quite tragic and depressing still, but at the same time it makes you smile because of Bill's devotion to Frank. Joel and Ellie later arrive to discover the sad news that they are both dead. So in the show, Ellie never meets Bill, which is a huge difference from the game. Also from this episode, it's shown that Tess has been in radio contact with Frank since she and Joel used to spend time with the couple. This never happens in the game either. Now let's talk about episode 4. In this episode of The Last of Us, Ellie and Joel take a detour through Kansas City after hitting a roadblock of crashed vehicles, which is a significant departure from the game as they were compelled to stop in Pittsburgh instead. Also, Ellie kills her first enemy in the original game while protecting Joel from an adversary attempting to drown him. In the show, however, Joel does a majority of the work, and Ellie ultimately helps murder a bandit who was attempting to assassinate Joel. Like in the game, Ellie was merely defending her friend, but the first victim of Ellie's actually happened before she met Joel, and this wasn't her first kill, making this act of defense her second victim, with many more to come. The last difference I want to discuss is Tommy's character. The Tommy from the games is considerably different from the Tommy we see in the TV show. The character is substantially more troubled and has a much more elaborate past in this iteration. The main deviation from the game is Tommy's engagement with the Fireflies and Joel and Tommy's seemingly cordial relationship following the end of the world. We anticipate that Tommy's position in the TV series and his difficult past will play a larger role in the story than they did in the games. I've discussed some of the similarities here and there while talking about the differences, but now I want to talk about a lot of the similarities in the first episode, mainly from the opening scene, that were done really well and stayed extremely faithful to the game. There are many that have been wanting to say that the show and the game are too different, and that's just not the case, and this detail alone just shows this. Sarah wears the exact shirt from the opening of the game as she does in the show, which is a pretty cool detail. The dialogue in the watch gifting scene is also almost identical at times. Also, the neighbor that attacks Sarah is the same in both the game and the show. The escape scene in the first episode is also very identical in its dialogue at times, as well as some shot-for-shot remakes of the scene, which is really a true devotion to the opening of the first game. The events leading up to Sarah's death as well as her death are also very similar in the way that they are shot and presented as well. The final sequence of the first episode of the show is very similar to the game, except that Tess and Joel kill 2 random soldiers instead of a Fedra officer. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments. What do you think about the show so far, and what would you like to see implemented from the game as far as storylines, characters, all that stuff? Also, if there's been some elements and aspects that differ from the game in the show that you don't really agree with and you want to talk about, let me know down in the comments, because I would love to hear some thoughts regarding this and kind of get some more insight on what everyone thinks about the show in relation to the original game. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it really helps me out. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you next time.